the brainwashing of the West. When you're born in England, when you're born in America, in Australia, in Germany, in France, even when you're born in China, in Russia, doesn't really make a difference. Fundamental, what I call truths about life and about society are given to you, even though they are total, utter lies. Lie number one is that you must live within a market economy called capitalism. We must have the private ownership and control of the means of production. We must have our factories, farms, businesses, shops controlled privately, following the price mechanism, following the profit motive, supply and demand, having a market dictate what we want to have produced, not having industry-wide planning through a decentralised worker, consumer or political council, citizen council system. We must instead have the market dictate what we want produced. Number two, that's what the first lie that's told to you. The second lie is that you as a human being, the main thing that is going to govern your social status in this world, and the main purpose of life, other than getting married and having kids, and that's a separate issue that I will talk about in a separate video, because I don't accept that that is a completely normal thing to do either. And certainly now, with the world being totally full, most people, well, not most people, but we need to reduce the amount of children that we have because the world is totally full. But I'll talk about that in a different video. But you're told that as a human being, your main value on this planet is how much wealth you can generate. Doesn't make a difference if it destroys the environment. It doesn't make a difference if you exploited workers and creamed off their labour. Doesn't make a difference if you was a bully at work, if you was Machiavellian, if you exploited things and cheated and did things that were totally immoral. Ultimately, as long as you can make as much money as possible, who cares? That's your main goal in life, and that's how you will be judged upon, is your wealth extraction from this planet. Number three, which is similar to number two actually, is that you must be a consumer. You must be a hyper-consumerist. You must purchase clothes, garments, watches, jewellery, cars. You must consume every single thing you possibly can. You must have 20 pairs of Nike trainers. You must have Gucci handbags that cost 600 quid. You must have shades or sunglasses that cost hundreds of pounds. You must use cars for the way that they look, not the way that they perform. You must buy a fast car even though it's illegal to drive above the speed limits. You must consume, consume, consume. You must be a passive consumer. That's what you have to be under capitalism. Everyone must accept the advertising industry in our lives. The grotesque Madison Avenue advertisements that happen, I'm not talking about just Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Nike, all, every one of them is trying to make you into a passive consumer, putting beautiful women in all these elaborate advertisements and videos that make you a consumer. Even though I accept some consumption should exist, you're turned into, or they attempt to turn you into, a hyper consumerist whose only goal in life is to enrich themselves with physical money and physical material wealth. You're told that an endless supply of goods in your life is what makes you happy and is the main thing you should be concerned about, not just about all the other things that as humans we like to do. And number four which is again closely tied to number 2 and number 3, and number 1 actually, is that you must be a wage slave. If you're not lucky enough, or if you don't inherit a massive amount of capital, or you're just unlucky, you must be a pathetic wage slave. And as a pathetic wage slave, you must take orders from above. Your working life is completely undemocratic. You go to work for 40 hours a week, you take orders from above. If you're a little bit lucky, you might be a manager, and you might be of the managerial class, where they have a little bit more democracy, but they still ultimately have to enforce the decisions that have been taken above. You don't vote for the pay that you earn. You don't vote for the policies of the workplace. You don't vote for what clothes you wear, what hours you work, what suppliers we use, what policies of the company. You don't do any of that. You're a pathetic wage slave, and working life is totally undemocratic for the vast majority of people. Unless you're lucky and you can be self-employed, and even that is not completely democratic, and I can't explain why, because you're forced to work and accept contracts under the capitalist system, or you won't be in business. But it's still better than being a wage slave, being a straight wage slave, as would be true working at Tesco's or Barclays or any major company. As a pathetic wage slave, even if you paid 100 grand a year, you're still a pathetic wage slave, unless there is democracy at work, where you voted for decisions, where you voted for management. You are still a pathetic wage slave, and that is a fact. Now, those 4 basic principles are driven into everyone. They're driven into everyone from the moment you leave your mother's womb. The moment you leave your mother's womb, those 4 basic principles of capitalism, wage slavery, and hyper-consumerism, and the fact that social status is governed by how much money you can earn, those basic 4 falsehoods, total falsehoods, are driven into every human's in this world. And practically everyone, even when they claim that they're on the left as a socialist in Labour Party, practically everyone accepts those 4 principles, even though those 4 principles are categorically lies. You are not a fucking wage slave. You are not a pathetic wage slave. Mother Nature made you an autonomous human being, and your human dignity, it relies upon you having some autonomy when you go to work. Not just when you vote for your politician once every 4 to 5 years, which has nothing to do with democracy. Representative democracy, this is probably the 5th disaster. This is probably the 5th principle, actually. The 5th principle, at least in countries that have a representative democracy like America, Australia and Britain. The 5th principle is that representative democracy as exists in these countries in the West is democratic. That's the 5th total falsehood that you're told. It's not democratic for many, many different reasons. I mean, for number 1, the idea that one person could possibly represent the views of a constituency that has 1 million people or millions is outrageous and absurd. The second problem is that because it's representative, and people are not directly making decisions at the local level, at the lowest level, and then having a system of kind of nested councils that would govern all of society, where you send delegates and delegates and delegates, and you share decision making between each council. Instead, under representative democracy, we have 1 MP for a whole region. They go off to Parliament. Most of them are pure careerists. They're in it for themselves. They're in it to make money and have a good job, basically. And they want power. A lot of them do want power. They want power and control. And I believe most people also want power and control in the sense of shared power and control, making decisions, being autonomous, participating. Everyone wants that, because I believe that's a part of fundamental human life. But some of these people that are megalomaniacs and are Machiavellian and are ruthless and so forth, some MPs, and they don't care about anything but enrichment of themselves. And they're just as bad as the capitalist system, some of them. But fundamentally, the idea that, and when they go to Parliament, all these interest groups, lobbying groups and so forth, all the massive banks, the massive supermarkets, the massive energy companies, they totally influence them. They get access to these, when bills are going through Parliament, they actually send their lobbyists to essentially pay for legislation. It is an absolute disgrace. So our legislation is all totally corporatised, essentially. And they do it through lobbying and other mechanisms. And they do it through giving actual cash donations to political parties and to MPs, which basically corporations are free to do that. I mean, they do it through individuals, but it is essentially a corporation doing that. He's acting in the interest of his corporation, and it is an absolute disgrace. We need total reform of campaign finances and political party donations, but I won't talk about that in this video. But democracy means participation and control. It doesn't mean being represented by one person for 4 to 5 years out of and taking no referendums, or hardly any referendums, and taking no political economic decisions yourself. Now, at the lowest level, in our councils or our parish councils, they're still representing a massive amount of people. I believe democracy has to be done at the lowest level. So I believe our councils have to be much more lower, and we have to have democracy at our work. Because under a communist system that I would like to see come about, under a real communist or a real socialist system, we would be planning together what we want produced to a system of decentralised councils, essentially. And the councils would fundamentally own the means of production, but the council would only have maybe 100 people in your individual council in your area, and they would be made up of hundreds and then thousands of mini councils throughout the United Kingdom, and we would plan what we want to have produced, and when you go to work, your workplace would be given an allocation of orders, if you will, on what to produce, and your workplace would be completely democratic. You would have worker autonomy. You would only be working for maybe 20 hours a week, 15 to 20 hours per week. You would not be controlled like a pathetic slave. All economic decisions would be completely open. Everyone would know who voted what, and it would be a fundamentally equal society, where you would not be penalised for not being the best entrepreneur who created electric vehicles or whatever you want to call it. You would not be penalised, and everyone would have a decent amount of money if we use money or labour vouchers. Everyone would have enough food. It wouldn't be a market economy. And if we did use, and by market I mean giving private companies or private entities control and operating under the profit motive, it wouldn't be based upon that. Now, some people believe, and I can do another video on this, some people believe that a totally planned economy is not possible for human life, and that we actually need, and that it would be much better to have some element of a market, or a fake market, because it would enable consumer choice, because we can't really predict what humans want. Fair point, that might be true to some extent. However, I don't believe that the fundamental means of production, that the commanding heights of the economy, should be run under a market system. If we do permit a market to exist, it would have to be for kind of non-essential goods. And I can talk about this in another video. But the basics of life, you would have enough food, you would have water, shelter, you would have a home that would be insulated, that would be based upon renewable energy. You would not be working a significant amount of time, you'd only be working. You would have far more time for leisure. You would have far more time to pursue other interests that are not work. and your working life would be fundamentally democratic, because you as the worker in your citizen capacity as a producer for the workplace, you would be entering into the decisions of your little workplace, and or even in your big, if it was a massive region wanting to collectivise a large amount of factories or whatever, you would still have the same control as everyone else, because you would all be voting on the principle of one worker, one vote, or I like to say one citizen, one vote, because the distinction between work and politics would be much closer. But now, you know, we don't think about, oh, we need to plan production. We don't think like that. We kind of think under it, oh, I hope a company like Microsoft produces X and X, or I hope Tesla do this, or I hope thinking. Under a communist, or under democracy, we would plan what we want to produce. We would survey people, that's one mechanism, and we would use complicated computers, and we would utilise information. We would also utilise robots more. We would have as many menial, rote, difficult, repetitive, boring tasks done by robots as much as we possibly could, as much as it would free up time for humans to do things that they actually want to do. If someone wants to be a carpenter, he will be permitted to be a carpenter. Me personally, I cannot stand, as a matter of my biological design, I can't stand any type of physical labour. I exercise, but I don't like doing electrical work, pulling cables in buildings. I don't like labouring on sites and doing anything physical. I have no interest in, absolutely no interest in it. I hate it, absolutely hate it. But some people, or joinery, I would hate joinery. I'm no good at anything like that. But some people have a natural affinity towards it and actually like doing it, and that's fine, because under a communist system, and I don't mean communist Russia, and I don't mean communist China or Vietnam, which have absolutely nothing to do with communism, unfortunately. That it is wage slavery, state capitalism. Now, I can talk about what happened in Russia, and I'm not an expert on Russia, but I don't accept it was communism. I believe that initially, the Bolsheviks and what they initially intended to do on paper, you know, having essentially workplace democracy in the councils and having elections of management and so forth. I believe that that on paper some of that was democratic, but I don't accept that in the end the whole collectivisation of industry, the collectivisation of farming, and everything that happened in the Soviet Union, which I believe it was a kind of state capitalist command economy. I mean, it wasn't, they did actually, Lenin in the 1920s, they did actually allow some market forces to exist, but they did actually operate, they did operate under a non-market economy for some of it. I'm not talking about the black market. They did operate under a command economy, to some degree they did, after Lenin died and when Stalin came about, and that you couldn't say that was capitalism. So sorry, I misspoke there. That period, a lot of it was not state capitalism, but it was still tyranny, because it was state-imposed, top-down, undemocratic tyranny. It's not worker control through a system of councils electing everyone and taking decisions collectively. It is not that. It is top-down, hierarchical, do as you're told, no democracy. So as far as I'm concerned, they were slaves under communist Russia. At the height of communism, they were slaves, just like we have wage slavery now. It's a similar injustice, just like we had feudalism, and serfs were slaves to their masters. Ultimately, it is a form of slavery, and wage slavery is a disgusting thing that happens to this day. Most of humanity is involved in some type of wage slavery. I don't mean the mere act of going to work. No. We have to have services, we have to have some level of production. We don't have to have as much production as we have. We could all say to each other, let's not have as much things produced, as much clothes, as much buildings, as much construction, and let's live a much simpler life, and let's work a lot less, and let's all have more time to do things we really want to do. like spending time with our family and friends and going on the beach in a beautiful country and going on long walks or playing sport together. We could do that and stop production. We can't do it under capitalism. We can't reduce consumption and reduce the amount of of work that we do to any significant degree under capitalism, because the market dictates it. The competition between firms dictates this. We need to give workers control, and it can only be done through a communist or socialist style council system where workers are enabled to control businesses and enterprises through their council system, and in their capacity as a citizen, they're in another council that plans production together democratically and integrates with regional councils and sends delegates, and we from the bottom up, we decide what we want to have produced and what we want to do. That's what we ultimately have to do. This society, even though I've blabbed on a bit then about other different stuff, this society tells everyone those 5 truths that are not truth. They're the opposite. They're totally false. Don't be an idiot who believes these truths, because these truths are a form of brainwashing from capitalism. You are an autonomous, you're not a wage slave, you're not a hyper-consumerist, you're not supposed to spend 40 hours a week at work and be ordered about like a slave. You are an autonomous human, and we can have a totally different system that brings about the best aspects of human nature. Not the system we live under now, which is a grotesque, predatory, market-driven consumer disaster. It is a disaster what is happening. What if we as a society said we don't want to use fossil fuels anymore, and we don't want to destroy the environment, so we're going to produce less, we're going to produce less cars, we're going to we're going to utilise wind, we're going to utilise solar, and we're going to have electric cars. And what if we wanted to do that? Well, can we do it easily under a capitalist system? No, because we're not in control. We're not in control of these companies that own the means of production. We're only very, very, very marginally in control through government, which is a disaster anyway, but through representative democracy. We need to be in control, and under a communist system we could stop that, and we could very quickly turn to producing the things we actually want to have produced, like the electric vehicles and so forth. That's one example of what we could do. But under capitalism it totally fails us by giving us a fake choice. Oh, you can buy a Ford petrol car, you can buy a Toyota petrol car, you can buy a Fiat petrol car, but you can't buy yet a cheap and economical electric car. They're very expensive, and a lot of people will not be able to afford them. Under a communist system, you would have an allocation based upon what you voted that you want produced, and if you've not, in the alternative, if it's a luxury good, or if it is subject to some type of market, at least there would have been an indication. We would have planned some allocation, of what we want to have produced. But under this system, we would have to wait years and years and years to get the electric vehicles at a point where everyone can afford them. Under a communist system, you would have it within a few months. So this is what I'm talking about. This is why under capitalism I don't accept that we have so many firms, the most inefficiency, the most waste. Having thousands and thousands of firms producing the same thing, a trainer, is just totally inefficient and ridiculous, and a massive amount of resources. All the marketing and the sales energy and effort that's put into capitalism, that energy and effort would not have to exist to the extent that it does under a communist style system. And it happens because of the competition between firms, because they're trying to grab your attention to get the sales, which are not guaranteed. But under a planning system, we could guarantee some amount of sales. So ultimately, and we could stop production for profit instead of production for use, essentially. Now, I'm not saying we'd have to live under everything totally planned. We could have some type of a market, but the market would only exist, I believe, for certain luxury goods, certain non-essential goods, because otherwise there's just a massive waste and a massive, all the externalities of the market, the disastrous effects on the environment. I think we'd have to move to a much simpler life where we don't have 20 leather jackets, 20 watches, 20 pairs of trainers and whatever else people buy, where we live a much more different type of life, simpler. We don't produce as much, but we work less and we have more time for leisure, the things that we actually care about in life. Because ultimately, we are socialised into being hyper-consumers by the capitalist system, by the advertising industry, by our peers, by the media, by the schooling. It's all a part of this system to turn you into this passive, hyper-consumerist wage slave. That's what it is, and it's a disaster. And so we have a different system. This different system is essentially communism, spoke about in the most generalist form. A system that democratises the economic sphere, a system that brings in planning, widespread planning, a system, I mean, we have planning under capitalism, even though no one talks about it, we do. The MIT is planning, it's government research and development. The massive military budget in America, the billions and billions, nearly $1 trillion that they spend on military, a large proportion of that is actually paying for the whole high-tech economy. You know, lasers, computers, internet, all that. That's research, biosciences, loads of that. Basically, the whole high-tech economy is socialised. The public takes the risk. They pay the military budget through taxes. The military budget is in fact spent, a lot of it, on research and development of non-military things, but you're not allowed to know this, it's just a fact. And then, you know, the internet was in production essentially, well, was in development for 40 years under the DARPA system in I believe the United States Pentagon, and ultimately that's not a competition that's produced that. They simply gave people the ability and time to develop this stuff and told them that they wanted it developed, and they developed it. That's not a market system, yet it produced the whole high-tech economy. So we do actually have a form of planning, but in Western countries we don't talk about it, but we do actually have it. We're told that really it's Microsoft and that it's really, you know, IBM and all the other massive companies, or Lockheed Martin, that produce all the military things, but a lot of the development actually began for the products that they make and all this stuff. A lot of the technology really comes from the state sector in a non-competitive environment, and then is passed across to private companies to make profits off it. But that's another total lie, actually, and that should be, there is actually planning in our society, but we're not supposed to talk about it because we don't want you to talk about communism and socialism, because that's what it really would be. We don't want you to talk about that. We want you to believe, even though it's a total lie, that that we need a market economy to ensure consumer choice, and that planning is fundamentally wrong. That's just straight BS, straight lie. We can live under a largely planned society. We can, and we hopefully will do in the future. There's many different models we can choose from. I'll talk about it in another video. It's going to have to be done through trial and error, because I definitely don't know the exact model. I know the principles, that it would have to democratise work, and that it would have to democratise, the political sphere would have to go lower down and enable decision making, in my opinion, through a council system of some sort, a citizen council system that would fundamentally own the means of production, and that would fundamentally be the ultimate arbitrators of what's produced and what's made. It would have to be under a system of thousands of councils that everyone is a member of and everyone is voting on. That's what it would, I believe, have to at some level do. Now, we don't have that structure in our modern society. We don't. We have the workplace, but the workplace is a dictatorship, is a tyranny, and has nothing to do with worker control. So it would have to, we'd have to choose a model, and we'd have to trial it to see how it works, And then if that didn't work, we trial another model to find out which model works with our particular society. But it would fundamentally be a communist socialist society. It would not be, in my opinion, it would not have a significant market, because the downsides to markets are the lack of control and the externalities that we want to remove or reduce. And you would work far less, and you would have much more time to enjoy life and do things that you really wanted to do. It would be the most liberating thing on this planet. But unfortunately, you're told through this disgusting system that this system that I just spoke about can't exist, and that you should be proud that we live under a capitalist disaster, which is the United Kingdom. But I'm not proud at all that I live in this disastrous country. That's not to say all the other countries in the world are not also disasters. Any country that has this system called capitalism is unfortunately a disaster. And even countries that call themselves socialist, like China and Vietnam, unfortunately have nothing to do with socialism. They're basically, I mean, China now, I don't know what you call it. I mean, some of the most grotesque wage slavery on the planet occurs in China. How the hell is that socialism? Do you think those workers that are making our phones and making our watches and making our leather jackets and making our, this isn't leather by the way, but making our computer games and making everything else that they make, the manufacturing plant of the world, do you think those workers are in control of their working life? Do you think they vote on policies? Do you think they have society-wide planning in China? They do have some type of planning in China, they do. I mean, the biggest trade union in the world, I believe, is in China. But it's all totally on paper. It doesn't in any way mean that they have democracy at work, in any stretch of the imagination. As far as I can see, those workers, I mean, they have the principle of 996 in China. 996, how can you possibly have that? That is 9 till 9, 6 days a week. How can that be democratic? That's an offence to humanity, an offence to socialism, and an offence to communism. And to claim that that country that enacts that is communist is fantasy land, human drivel. It has nothing to do with communism. It's state capitalism with a fairly significant overall command from the Chinese Communist Party, okay, that commands certain things to be produced. So if you want to call that planning, call it planning. But fundamentally, that's a top-down hierarchical form of socialism with a massive market, because there's a massive market, where the vast majority of workers are wage slaves, where the vast majority of workers are not involved in the planning and control of their enterprises. So in my opinion, it has nothing to do, or very little to do, with socialism and communism. I would say that the Soviet Union was more democratic than communist China, had more of a, even though that was a total tyranny and dungeon. So unfortunately, other than the odd business in America and in Spain and in certain parts of the world that are democratic to some small degree, unfortunately there is no society-wide implementation of a socialist, what I would call a socialist government, or a socialist society, because it's not government, it's what happens in society as well. But I believe that that model still, a real socialist communist society, is the correct model for human nature, is the correct model for us as humans. I think that it most matches with our best aspects of our design, our fundamental human nature of wanting cooperation and sharing and solidarity and being free and making decisions on our own. I believe that that is a fundamental aspect of human nature, even if some people have it less than others. I believe it is a fundamental aspect that can only be changed through genetic changes in evolution. And I believe that and so because it's so fundamental to us, the belief of being free at work, free in making decisions and participating together, because that is so fundamental, that any system like capitalism that's based upon competition and lack of control and wage slavery cannot possibly be said to be compatible with human nature. And not just that, but it doesn't make a difference what I think. If we live under this course of capitalism, we will live under, we could actually see the end of humankind, because we're destroying the planet through our hyper-consumerism of animals. I mean, the consumption of animals causes, and the livestock industry causes 50% of global CO2 emissions. CO2 is likely to be destroying, the ozone, and ultimately is causing global warming and climate change, which will fundamentally alter the amount of habitable aspects of the world, which will fundamentally mean, under this disastrous capitalist system, there will be more wars as more people fight for resources and countries fight for resources with an ever decreasing habitable aspect of the world. So capitalism is going to basically ensure the destruction of mankind if we carry on this course. So we have to change. We have to change to a communist system where we plan everything essentially, or plan the main aspects of our lives, and we have to reduce consumption, stop consumption of animals, including fish, stop the consumption, the dairy, the meat, the oil, stop it all. Don't eat those foods, because as a human I believe you're a herbivore. And we also have to stop consumption of products. I'm talking about garments, fast fashion. We have to stop all that. We have to stop consumption of any industry that is based upon the fossil fuels. Fossil fuels should be kept in the ground, and we have to live in a kind of eco-socialist, much less consumption world, but you will also be working much less, and you will be enabled to live a good, fulfilling life where you can read more time for reading, more time for writing, more time for producing content like this, where it will be a totally cooperative world, where the system will, instead of trying to promote competition, it would promote the general interest, the public interest, and cooperation to your neighbours and to the other people on this planet that are fundamentally the same race as you, because we are all one person. We are all one race, I should say. We're the human race, Homo sapiens sapiens. That's what we are. Whether you're black, white, yellow, brown, who cares? We are essentially one human. There is very little genetic difference between us, even though the different geographical regions have different adaptations. Like some Chinese people have the fold in the eye to protect them from either the UV lights or the whatever. Some people have are not lactose intolerant and have lactase enzymes in the adulthood. I have lactase enzymes in adulthood. Because my ancestors thousands of years ago, whether out of request for variety or whether out of actual biological need, because they were going to starve in a famine, they decided to drink the milk of an animal, of a baby calf. Now that baby calf, they decided to drink the milk, of a cow that was designed for the baby calf. Drinking another animal's milk is the most ridiculous thing that Mother Nature's ever enabled humans to do. It's full of cholesterol, animal protein, growth hormones, that's designed to grow that baby cow into a massive, 400-pound animal. You should not be drinking cow's milk, but for some reason, Mother Nature let humans, some stupid humans years ago did it, and now the Mother Nature's produced an adaptation that enables at least the Caucasians, most white people if you will, can drink cow's milk. But a lot of parts of the world in Asia still don't have the enzymes, because Mother Nature designed you not to have the enzymes, because once you've stopped drinking your mother's milk, you have no requirement to break down the sugar that's in mammalian breast milk, which is lactose. So you don't need lactase after wean, after you've stopped drinking your mother's breast milk. But again, we do that, and so we consume animals. We consume animals to a ridiculous degree, a totally toxic degree. It causes cancer, heart disease, strokes, arthritis, vision loss, autoimmune disease, sexual impotency. All the known degenerative diseases are caused essentially by consumption of animal foods as the principal determining cause. The second principal determining cause is the consumption of refined foods like oils. Oils are essentially toxic in humans. They're not toxic in the sense that a little bit of it will kill you. I'm talking about the amounts that we eat of fried food and of oil is ridiculous. And that oil is atherogenic because it closes arteries, because it causes oxygen to not be transported properly through the red blood cells in the hemoglobin, because it causes red blood cells to clump together. It causes cells that are supposed to, bounce off each other in your veins and capillaries and arteries. It causes them to clump together in a process called erythrocyte clumping. That clumping prevents oxygen and other things, nutrients, from going from the red blood cell into the cells that need them in your body. It literally does it. I've seen it in the human eye. I've seen I've seen videos of red blood cells clumping together, and they can't fold and get through the capillary wall in your eyeballs and in every other part of your body to feed the cells that need that oxygen. And in the part of the human arteries where you get it, the red blood cell clumping is essentially the cause of heart disease, because your body has to compensate the fact that the red blood cells are clumped together. Your endothelium lining basically opens up and enables cholesterol and other particles to get into the artery wall, because the body's compensated for this massive clumping of red blood cells that should never be there, never be all clumped up like that in that manner. And it dumps the cholesterol, or cholesterol gets stuck, and fat deposits in the arteries, and over years and years you will eventually get a heart attack or a stroke. Now, I know I've gone off on a tangent there, but what we eat is also an incredibly important subject, and we don't eat a healthy diet in the West, and the reason is because we eat animal foods and refined foods, but animal foods is the principal killer. And smoking, of course, but smoking, again, everyone knows smoking's bad, but everyone doesn't know that eating meat's bad, and eating meat is bad, and eating meat is destroying the planet. Eating meat is destroying the planet as bad as fast fashion and fossil fuels. Unfortunately, it is, because eating meat it causes a massive amount of methane. It's so inefficient that we have to give carbohydrates to pigs and to farm cattle, cows, when we should be taking them ourselves. Because a carbohydrate diet of starches is the natural diet for mankind, and we have to also understand that in your natural state you would not be eating hamburgers and chicken and fish and other things on a regular basis. Maybe a few times a year you can have a piece of chicken or fish, maybe 10 times per year or once a month, but other than that you shouldn't be touching the stuff. But again, we live under a fundamentally disastrous world where you're told basic lies, and actually I'm going to make that the 6th basic lie. The 6th basic lie is that you are an omnivore, and that is false. You're not an omnivore, you're a herbivore. So that's the 6th basic lie. The 6th basic lie, sorry. So those lies are a disaster, and they are total lies, and never ever ever let anyone tell you that they are the truth, because they are not. They are socialized, not socialism. They are socialized in the sense that when you're growing up, the system, the capitalist system, tells you these lies, but they are not the truth. They never have been the truth. They never will be the truth. Thanks for watching this video. I should have made it a lot shorter. I don't know why I've blabbed on for so long, but I had to. Don't believe those total lies. Thank you.